Well, welcome back to the Practical Church Podcast. My name is Dylan Dotson, and today on the show, I'm going to share with you 5 ways to keep your staff connected in a digital world. 5 ways to keep your staff connected in a digital world. Speaking of living in a digital world, as always, this show is brought to you in partnership with Mission Support. They help you with a number of services that might be hard and stressful for you, particularly things like website and branding and strategic planning, some of the things we'll hit on in this episode. You can head to missionsupport.com today and talk to a guy to see how they can help you love being a pastor. Again, as always, man, one of the best things about Mission Support is not just their affordability, but they don't lock you into long-term contracts. So you can use them as long as you find them beneficial. So check out missionsupport.com to hear more from them. And today, now let's get into the episode. All right, 5 ways to keep your staff connected in a digital world. And I guess I've heard it this way, is obviously increasingly, work from home, working kind of like a hybrid thing, especially with church plants, smaller churches. A lot of people meeting portable. Even if you have your own building, like office space isn't really the priority. It's, kid space, event space, auditorium, that sort of thing. And obviously we have all these digital tools now. So the question is, how can you still keep a team communicating well, on the same page, working together well, if you're not seeing each other every single day? Even more so if you have part-time staff, key volunteers, and you're not seeing each other every day. What does it look like, or what are some things that you can use to help keep your staff together? I'm just going to share 5 things that we used at New City Church that we found helpful over the years. These 5 things are what we currently use today, because like you, we probably tried various things in the past, and these are the things that have stuck with us, okay? So 5 ways to keep your staff connected in a digital world. Here's number 1, Marco Polo. Now, there is an app, if you're like the game that you played in the kid when you were in the kid. As a kid in the pool, because you're not a pool. As a kid in the pool, no, I'm talking about the app. There's an app called Marco Polo. Some of you might be familiar with it. Some of you might not be. It is a voice messaging app. And you might say, well, why don't I just send like an audio message and a text message, that sort of thing. I use and recommend Marco Polo. There is a free version. I use the paid version, but you can use the free version as well. For me, I don't like things getting stuck in text messages, and also listening to text messages and audio. Sometimes things can get lost. We use Marco Polo for our staff, which is an app that you can download. Again, there's paid features, but there's also, you can use it for free. And it's video messaging. And this is helpful because sometimes, you need a little bit more context than a text. And sometimes you might want to say a little bit more than even in an email, because you don't want to like type out this long, email. Or sometimes, man, you're trying to ask a question or explain something that even if you could do it in an email or a text, it's nice to have like a person like hear their tone, their connotation, and communicate that way. And so we use Marco Polo. Again, I use the paid version. I have a subscription to it, which means I can do like 2x speed and speed it up and do that sort of thing. But you don't have to do the paid version. And that's just helpful. It gets it out of text messages, and it's for things that, you might need to talk for about 30 seconds, a minute and a half to explain something. Obviously, if you're not in person, you can't do it in person. You might not want to wait until the next time you see each other. And it has a really personal and in-person feel that like just sending a voice message memo doesn't. And again, it kind of helps things separate from me. So I recommend Marco Polo. We use it for all of our staff. I mean, some staff use it more than others, especially the staff that I don't see as much in person, then I'll use it more. So I'll use it, for example, with our worship director. We might talk through service planning stuff or a question about song, maybe give feedback on how the service went. Our first impressions director, so we'll talk about, planning, volunteer stuff, if we've got an event going on, like who's going to pick up what, that sort of thing. And so there's just different ways to use it. And again, I found kind of 30 seconds to a minute and a half, especially when you can 1.5 or 2x it. It doesn't take a lot of time, and it's more personal, and it's in some ways better to connect in certain ways than text or email can. And so I'd recommend Marco Polo. Again, it's helpful just because you can see each other and it feels a lot more personal. Because, as we all know, like some things can get lost in the text, the human emotion, the question, like why you're asking something. Even if it's not necessarily like a hard thing or a tense thing, it's just easier and more connecting. And you can just like miss out on emotions and stuff in text. So of course, I use text, I use email all the time. But if there's something I have a question on that like I need more than just an email to explain, or, if you do an email, you have to go back and forth 3 or 4 times to really understand like what's being asked. I found it saves a lot of time. So Marco Polo is one of the apps that we use on staff here at New City Church. to do one-on-one communication. You can do group Marco Polos as well if you want to do that. But most of ours is just like one-on-one, especially for me, interacting with all of our staff as a lead pastor. I find it really, really helpful. So still use email, still use text, but Marco Polos are helpful to maybe talk a little bit more in depth than what an email allows, and to ask questions and that sort of thing that makes it harder on some of just the text-based platforms. And so number one, 5 ways to keep your staff connected in a digital world. Found Marco Polo really helps. Again, for us, every staff's different. The only time there's 5 of us on staff at New City, the only time we're all together during the week is Monday afternoon at staff meeting. It's the only time that we're all actually together. And so having some personal connections throughout the week is really helpful, so that, if there's an issue, if there's a tension, or if someone's got a question, we're not just like waiting until the next week to see each other again. So I just found Marco Polo be really helpful. You can get it on your app store. Number 2, we use a Trello board. Now, some of you might be more familiar with Trello than not. I'm not the one that organizes it for us, but we use the Trello board for following up, primarily for following up with first-time guests or with new guests or people who fill out Connect cards for the first time. I've talked about this in some previous episodes. So basically, we have a follow-up process at New City. So if somebody fills out a Connect card, they get a series of texts and emails. Those are automated from us. But we also, if they have, we also reach out and offer to meet with every new guest at New City. And so in our Trello board, we put the person who did fill out the Connect card, any information that we got on Sunday, why they're here, that sort of thing, family, connections, if they have kids. And then we'll mark the things that they checked. So they might have checked community groups or whatever. And then they'll get assigned a person. So like, for example, they might get assigned to me to follow up and meet with. And so in that Trello board, I'll say, hey, I reached out on Monday. Typically reach out via email. If I don't hear anything back on Wednesday, I'll follow up via text. And so I'll kind of say on Wednesday, I followed up, blah, blah, blah. I'll put in there, here's when we met. And if the meeting occurred, I'll say it occurred. And we have different kind of things of like where they are in the journey. So if they get reached out to, there's like they get their card gets moved to a first contact, and then gets moved to like second contacts, and then meeting scheduled, and then like what happened at the meeting. So it's just a really easy way to know like where am I in this person, especially if you have multiple different staff potentially reaching out to somebody, like, hey, who was this person assigned to, and were they followed up with? And if they had community groups or partnership or whatever, what was the conversations there? So again, if you're new at New City, you have an automated flow that you get put into, but we also reach out to you. And so the Trello board helps us say like where they are in the process and who actually talked to them. So our first impression director puts in the puts in the Connect cards on Sunday afternoon after church, and then she'll assign that first person to whoever's supposed to follow up with him. Also, we found this to be helpful. If you have like a husband and wife, for example, and they both give you a Connect card or contact information, we give them separate Trello board cards. Because like if I'm following up with the husband and someone else is following up with the wife, and I've met with the husband, but the wife hasn't been met with yet, you can't like move the card because it's like dependent on 2 people. So if we do get a married couple and they both fill out a Connect card, we'll separate them in our Trello board so that they both are individually followed up with, if that makes sense. So obviously if you get a husband and wife and only they fill out one Connect card and it was the wife who filled it out, well, then she'll get met with the woman. Or if it was the husband who filled it out, me or Brian, someone on staff, will meet with the man. But if they both fill out a Connect card, we do put them in separately in the Trello board to make sure they're both followed up with individually. So we use Marco Polo as a great way to communicate speaking wise to staff. And we use a Trello board to stay connected, again, because we're not seeing each other throughout the week. We can't just be like, hey, I talked to this person, or where you are with this person. Also, that stuff can be forgotten and confused. And so it's a way we can update the Trello board as things happen, even if we aren't all together, so we know exactly where they are and where they are in the follow-up process. Number 2, that was number 2, Trello board. Number 3, email. Now, obviously you might be like, well, that's obvious. Here, I think you need to be, if you're not, clear on expectations for what email and messaging expectations are. So when it comes to email, I've shared in previous episodes, like it's a pet peeve of mine how bad not just pastors can be, but just people in general, and obviously pastors are just people. Like, I don't think it's a pastor problem. I think it's just a culture problem that people are quote unquote really bad with their email, as if it's like a talent to be good at email. It's not. It's just like, are you on top of it? And do you have ways to stay on top of it? And so like not responding to email, it doesn't work at New City Church. Our expectation is that you'll respond within 24-ish hours of the work week. Even if it's something that can't be responded to, like maybe someone asks you a question and you don't have the answer until a week from now, you're going to respond and say, hey, I'll follow up with on this date. And so you got to be clear, like, it's just one of the easy ways. Email comes from people, and it's like people get fall through the cracks all the time. And sometimes it's always surprising to me when people respond to me, like, I didn't expect you to respond. Like people at New City, or like a new person, and like they had a question, I responded to them. It's like they're like, I can't believe they actually got a message back. Because again, like a lot of people just aren't good to it. So it's like, in my opinion, really low level fruit. Now, low hanging fruit in order to like be above and beyond in this. Now, when I mentioned email, like, I would just say you need to have expectations for staff, both how you interact with each other and how they interact with people at your church. Like you can't, like at New City, you can't be bad at email and be on staff at New City. Like that's not a thing. It's not acceptable. We live in a digital world, so we've got to make sure that we're staying on top of that. Now, I also, I know this is an email here. I just want to say you should be very clear on messaging expectations, because in a digital world, we have texts, we have emails, we have DMs. You might have like Group Me, you might have Marco Polo. I mean, it's like a video message, but it's still like a message. I think it's helpful for your staff to be very clear on like what type of messages need to be followed up with in what time frame. So for us at New City, like if I email a staff member or a staff member emails me, we know, hey, I need to respond to that email. A text message is not as urgent. Not necessarily, I shouldn't even say an email is urgent. The email is the expectation you will follow up with at some point. It doesn't need to be right away, but you won't just sit there. A text is like, hey, like I'll follow up with it at some point. Even for me, I don't have any notifications on my phone. So if you text me, like my phone doesn't go off. I don't really see it until I just decide to check my text messages. Same thing with Marco Polo. I don't like, staff knows, for example, if they send me a Marco Polo, sometimes to send me a text or an email, because it's not something I use all the time, and I really only use it for staff. And so sometimes someone will send me a text and say, hey, I sent you a Marco Polo just so see when you get a chance. So like for us at New City, we're very clear for staff. You don't need to be like responding within 5 seconds. You need to respond within like the next 24 hours if it's like during the week, but like you just need to respond. It doesn't have to be right away. And so for us, like we're just very clear, like email needs to be responded to, text, Marco Polo, that sort of thing, get it to it eventually. But like don't set the expectation of every form of communication, because it can be overwhelming. So it could be helpful for you if you feel like some of your communication with your staff or within staff is like breaking down. If you have lots of different ways that staff is communicating to each other digitally throughout the week, that can also be confusing. So it might be helpful to say like, hey, like email for us in New City is, if you need something done, email is the primary way to do it. In fact, sometimes somebody will send me a text and I'll respond back to the text like, hey, can you send me an email about that? Because for me, I have a system of my email. If it's in my email, it's going to get taken care of. Text I sometimes see. If I'm not near my computer, can't deal with it now, then I'll forget about it. And so I would just like set clear expectation with messaging, whatever type of messaging you use or your church uses. With staff, just make sure like, here's our expectations of how to handle it. Otherwise, you'll probably have a lot of frustration because you kind of leave it up to them to decide. And some staff might be better than others on certain digital platforms. And so that's my advice for email. I would just be very clear, like here's how we use it as a staff, both internally and with other people. Email us, set clear expectations. But obviously, if you set expectations, then email can be helpful. I also would just recommend too, like be very clear, you don't need to respond right away. It needs to be responded to within like 24-ish hours. But, if you've listened to this for any length of time, I've talked about how email is invited interruption. So for me, I check my email a couple times a day. I'm not on it all the time. I don't have email on my phone. I will respond, but not necessarily that second. So just set clear expectations for email. I think that can help you save some frustration. Number 4, a fourth way to stay connected is group texting of some way. Now, depending on the size of your staff, you could do a group text, or you could do something like Group Me or WhatsApp, that various things. We've done different things in the past. We've done Group Me in the past. Now we use just a group text message for staff. There's 5 of us. Again, for us, it's not used all that much because, like, if you're going to put it in the group staff, it kind of needs to be relevant for everybody. So for example, we're about to print some New City Church shirts. And so the person who's been, getting the design, all that sort of stuff, like today, for example, put in the group text, hey, what do you think of this design? Or like any other thoughts? Or here's what we're doing. Let me know if you like it or don't. Like that sort of thing is helpful. It's not like we don't solve anything over group messaging because like people could be responding at different times and they got to scroll up a bunch. I personally like don't like group texts for that reason. It can be confusing. You don't want to check it all the time. And then it's like, who said what, that sort of thing. So depending on the size, I mean, I guess if it's 3 people or less, you could probably use it more. Group texting is a thing, but again, for us, it's clear. It's like, hey, if you need something or if you really need a response, the group, the staff text is not the place to do it. Because not everyone always checks it. You don't have to be on top of it, which is what we said. Like, you don't have to like be following this group text all the time. We don't use it all the time. We might use it, I don't know, a handful of times per week, maybe, depending on what's going on. But that's one way as well. I would just be clear on your expectations if you do some sort of group messaging, group texting. And again, like to not overwhelm you or your staff, you also can't say like every single digital communication platform is high priority. Like it can't be, hey, if you get a group text and Marco Polo and an email and a DM, like that's just overwhelming. So you gotta be clear on like where the priorities are. So again, like for us, if somebody needs something, like we know, hey, email is the primary way if you need something to make sure that it's responded to. And so I think that helps us as well, not be so overwhelmed. But group texting, that's the way you could do it, or group messaging, just be clear on its function. That's the number 4 of ways you can stay connected. And number 5, what we use a lot is Google Drive. Now, you could use like OneDrive, various cloud-based platforms. We use Google. I recommend Google because it's universally used on any computer, device, software. You know, you're not locked in so much like if you are on Microsoft Teams or that sort of thing. And it's free. It's also just like used the most. So it's easy if like you're onboarding staff. Like most people have some sort of familiarity with it. So we use Google Drive. So for example, all of my sermons, I've got a folder there, which is helpful. So when my sermon notes are inputted on Thursdays into the computer, so someone on staff does it. Like I write my sermon, and on Thursday morning is kind of when I wrap it up. And on the top page of my Google Doc of my sermon is the screen, whether scriptures, points, whatever, anything on the screen, it's on there. And so like I don't have to like tell them, okay, it's ready, go put it on. They just know Thursday, hey, go to my sermon, and it tells them exactly what to do. Same thing for like our community group leader guides. We do small group, sermon-based small groups. So I'll write the community group leader guide, put it on Google Drive. They know where to find it, that sort of thing. Sermon notes. Yeah, I mentioned sermon notes. Sometimes we'll do like events or events checklists. We'll make I don't know what it's called. I guess it's not called a Google Doc, but there's a thing in Google where you can actually make checklists. And so we've done that a few times. Like we made the checklists on Google, whatever it's called. It's not a Google Sheet. I don't know. You probably know what it is. I'll look it up after the fact. It's a Google something on the drive, and people can check as things are done. We've got things like on our shared drive as well. We've got information on like partnership or like pictures that were taken on Sunday. They're uploaded to the drive. Our vertical videos. So if you've been listening to this, as you know, every week we do a Bible in a minute, and also do a sermon clip. And so those get uploaded to the drive. And then when they get posted on social media, the person that posted them goes to the drive, downloads it to their phone, and they post it on the appropriate platforms on the appropriate days. And so we use Google Drive a lot. Also, like the benefit of it is it's there forever. So if you need to go back and find something, it's really helpful, especially for sermons. Google Drive is really helpful for me. Sometimes I'll go through old sermons just to see like what illustrations I've used. Or if I'm using an illustration that I know I've used before, I'll like type in some of the words, and I can see how recently in the past I have used that sermon illustration. My rule of thumb is this in sermon illustrations: you can do it about once a year, which I think a lot of pastors assume like once you've used it once, you can't use it again. But there, people don't always remember. Not everybody was there. You're going to obviously have new people since the last time you used it. And so I'll use things like once a year. Of course, at some point, if it's a really memorable story, you can't use it for forever. But my rule of thumb is like if it's been over a year and I haven't used it a ton before, then it's safe to use it again. So Google Drive is just a really helpful way. We've got sheets and Google Docs and procedures, that sort of thing, follow-up processes, all on there that staff can easily find and have it accessible to them. So those are 5 ways to keep your staff connected in a digital world. 5 things we use at New City: the Marco Polo app, the Trello board, email, group texting. We use that probably the least frequently, but we use it every once in a while. And Google Drive. Those are 5 things you can use to help you keep your staff connected in our modern day and age. So here's my observation and reminder for this episode. For church planters especially, just remember this. You need to earn the right to preach to your people. You need to earn the right to preach to your people. And especially in the early days of a church plant or in a smaller church setting, people are coming because of the connection in the community. They're not coming necessarily because of the preaching. And so what happens is people are more likely to listen to you, especially if you're younger or you're just new and they don't have a much relational history with you. How you care for them, meet with them, talk with them, pray with them and for them really sets the tone of how willing they are to listen to you. And I think sometimes, we can plant a church or get into ministry because we just want to preach the Bible. But it's like, we kind of think of like the heroes of the faith, the people you really like listening to. And you need to realize like you're excited to listen to your favorite preacher, but the average person is not feeling that same way about listening to you. They got their life going on, all those sort of things, other things they're thinking about. And so, man, just remember, earn the right to preach to your people. As the church grows, you've been doing it for a while. The dynamic can change a little bit, although you still need to continue to do that. But just, man, earn the right. Care for them well, love them well, serve them well, pray for them well, and they'll be more likely to listen to you and to trust you. The thing is, like, if you're just starting out and nobody really has any relational connection with you and you're preaching great sermons, it still won't be as effective and moving to your congregants as if they know you or if people know you. Now, obviously, you can't know everybody, but you can know probably more than you think you can. So just remember, earn the right to preach to your people. Don't just preach at them. So here is this episode's personal growth tip. Remember this, the quicker you can get it done, the better. The quicker you can get it done, the better. Let me explain myself. It's not about how hard or how long you work, but rather about what problems you solve. Therefore, it is helpful to ask yourself, how can I make this easier? For example, here are some questions that I can and could and have asked myself about sermon writing, which is something that I do every week, something that some of you do every week as well. Of course, you can adapt these questions for whatever your recurring tasks are, but here's how I've thought about it for preaching. Right? What distractions am I allowing that break my focus when studying and writing? Right? What distractions am I allowing that break my focus when studying and writing? Or this, what other preachers could I ask and learn from regarding their sermon writing process? Helps me get it done better, more efficiently. Or this one, is the environment that I write sermons conducive to sermon writing? So for example, am I somewhere where I can be interrupted easily? That's not good. Is there a more efficient way to capture notes or sermon illustrations? I should do that. Do I sermon prep when my energy and focus are at their high point in the day? That's a big thing to ask if you're writing your sermons. Are you doing it when you're most focused? Is the environment I write sermons conducive to sermon writing? Or here's one more. Since sermon writings is one of the most mentally demanding parts of my job, am I prioritizing it on my schedule? Am I prioritizing it on my schedule? Because it is one of the most mentally demanding things that I do every week. See, it isn't about how much time it takes to write sermons that matters. It's what matters is how helpful the sermons actually are. Whether it took 30 seconds, which of course it doesn't, or 30 hours, the amount of time I spent is irrelevant. And what matters is how helpful the sermon actually is. So can I just say that 7 hours of sermon prep can consistently produce a better sermon than 12 hours of sermon prep if given the right conditions. Just say it again. 7 hours of sermon prep, or whatever you're doing now, but if you took a couple hours away, can produce a better sermon. I'm not saying it will, but it can produce a better sermon than 12 hours of sermon prep if given the right conditions, study habits, and environment. See, part of the thing that I realized, the biggest reason I've realized with pastors that they spend too long on sermon prep is because their environment and their focus is off. It's not because they're actually spending like 20-something straight hours studying and focusing. It's because they're checking email, text, they get interrupted as they do it. So the question again is, what is the quickest way you can solve the problem of your recurring task or tasks? The value you provide is more important than the time you spent on the problem. Make it as easy as possible to solve it quickly, then you can move on to the next thing. Well, today's question comes from the Practical Church Facebook group. Again, if you're on Facebook, you're not part of the Practical Church group, search it out. Be easy to find. You can ask questions from other pastors and ministry leaders. And that's what I'm going to talk about today. Somebody recently asked in the group, they said that they're running out of chairs and they were asking for recommendations on what type of chairs to buy. So I'm kind of condensing the question. They need some more chairs. What kind of church chairs should they buy? Now, as always, I just want to share some quick thoughts. Number one, remember, don't just buy the cheapest thing. Don't just buy the cheapest thing, because I'll frustrate you. The other thing you need to remember when it comes to buying chairs, and it's hard because, man, chairs are stinking expensive. They are expensive. But you got to remember, if you buy chairs and whether you are portable or have your own space, but your seating isn't like permanent. In other words, you can take up the chairs. It's not like drilled into like an auditorium, for example, in a school, you can't move those chairs. But if you have your setup of chairs is something that you can move, or like we currently meet at New City at our current facility, we have our own space, but the chairs, we can move them around for events. You got to think about when you buy chairs, you also got to think for the future, because whatever you buy now, when you have to buy more chairs in the future, whether maybe because you just need more chairs or because some of them have worn down or have stains or have broken, you have to keep buying the same type of chairs. Otherwise, it looks weird. So the challenge with buying chairs is if you go just with like the cheapest thing, well, like a couple of years from now, when you need to buy more chairs, if you decide, hey, these chairs aren't that great quality at all, then you have to start from scratch and buy way more again. So my recommendation is buy something a little bit nicer, so that when you have to buy more, you're not starting all over again. Okay, so that's what you got to think about. You got to think about comfort. People are going to sit them for a while, and what you want your chairs to do. So one of the challenges for us in New City is, as I've shared on previous episodes, when I'm preaching, we don't, like right now we're preaching through the book of Acts. When I'm reading the texts in the book of Acts throughout the sermon, it is not on our screens. What is on our screens is the chapter and verses, so let's say Acts 12, and then the page number, which is 977 on our Bibles, the Bibles that we have at New City Church. So when I say, hey, today we're going to be in Acts chapter 12, that's what's on the screen. Acts 12, page 977. And every time I'm reading, that's what's on the screen. Now we do that because we want people to engage and read the Bible. And even if like they don't know where it is, it literally just says page 977. So nobody feels dumb. Nobody feels stupid. Anyway, we've done this for almost since we planted, and I really like the practice. So for us, we have chairs with back pocket things. Hey, it's a back pocket that we can put Bibles in. So we can put Bibles in those chairs so they're accessible to everybody. Every single chair has a Bible there. So you can think about that, or some chairs have like racks below them that you can put things on. But my recommendation is, hey man, think long term. Again, if you're going to have to buy more in the future, would you continue to buy this type, or would you have to start from scratch? So that's my big recommendation. We have cloth chairs in New City. They've been fine. They're expensive, and we a couple of years ago had to buy more. But instead of starting from scratch, we were able to buy more of the same one, which ultimately saves us a lot of money. So that's what I'm thinking of. Don't just go the cheapest route and think, hey, in the future, if I had to buy more of these chairs, do I think we're going to like these, or are we going to have to start completely from scratch in the future, which will end up costing you more money? Those are some thoughts when it comes to buying chairs for your church. Well, as always, thank you so much for joining me today on the Practical Church Podcast. If you want more from me, you can head to DylanDotson.com. And don't forget, we are always brought to you in partnership with Mission Support. So other things today that we're talking about digitally, SEO, websites, consulting strategies, missionsupport.com. Talk to a guy today. Super affordable. You're not locked into long-term contracts, and they just do a lot of great stuff. So check them out, missionsupport.com. And if you want more from the show, you can go to missionsupport.com/practical. You can submit a question there for a future episode. And you also can subscribe to the Practical Church newsletter, which comes out every other week in conjunction with the podcast. It's the opposite weeks, where I give you more practical tips to help you plant a church that grows, thrives, and is healthy. So check that out, missionsupport.com/practical. Thanks for being with me. I'll be back with you in 2 weeks for another Practical Church podcast.